Welcome to Over the Line, the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bland. Today we are on episode 3, and I'm sitting here with two of my very best friends, Jeremy Morrow, Shanty Morrow. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I always kind of come on here and talk about some of the things we talked about before I turned the recorder on, but there was a lot of editing in the first episode, a little bit less in the second, and I'm hoping that maybe this is a little bit more uncut, so we'll see how it goes. Start off with telling me where you're from. I know I think a lot of people know you're from Brownstown, but are you originally from Brownstown, or where you live now?
Yep, I grew up in Brownstown my whole life. Grew out in what a lot of people know as the Sowers area, and attended Sowers Lutheran Church from first grade to fourth grade, and then fifth grade on at Brownstown here.
Yeah, I started at Brownstown. I didn't live here my whole life. I moved here when I was 4, but I stayed at Brownstown the whole time and graduated. And Jeremy and I actually graduated high school together.
Can I ask what year?
2000 was when we graduated.
The year 2000?
Yeah.
Graduated same class.
Ago.
And now you live out in the western part of Jackson County, so kind of out there where I'm at.
Yep. A lot of people know it. Clear Spring Knobs at the top of the Clear Spring Knobs. Some people probably know it as Thompson Road. That's where Shanty's family kind of, as the way I gather it, kind of pioneered the area. Some of the first folks out there.
Yeah, my grandpa moved here. He was actually born in the house that I remember being there before. It's actually right there by your barn. My grandpa was born in that house, and then all of the family after that just kept going on the road, and then we ended up out there now.
Yeah, so listening to the last podcast, you were talking about western Jackson County, and I have to agree with a lot of your sentiments about that area. Where I grew up there were some hills, but pretty flat over in that eastern part of the county where I grew up, right? And then Shanty and I got together, and I moved in out in that area. But just absolutely some of the best and most beautiful country, I think, in this county.
Yeah, western Jackson County's been well represented on the podcast so far between me and, and you two and Justin Underwood. Jackson County's so unique, we have the hills, the hill country, and then we have a lot of river bottom ground, mm-hmm. Of course, the floodplains, and then we got you think about the sand prairie type in Bologna, and it's kind of unique.
It's pretty cool up there on the hill, too, where the power lines are. If you look off to the south area, you can actually see the Madison Power Plant steam rolling. Yeah. My kids saw that, and
you can see the stacks.
You can see it, and they're just blown away that you could see it that far away because we're so high.
Yeah. Sometimes, when I go up there, there's another lookout up there kind of going up what we call the knobs between my house and your house up through there. There's another spot you can pull up there and you can see Seymour lit up. Mm-hmm. And to be at one spot and basically see all of Seymour mm-hmm. is pretty cool. I think, people in Seymour who maybe don't make it out to western Jackson County very often probably need to jump in the car sometime and take a little drive.
Absolutely. On Friday nights, we can see the lights just shining bright. And then on Saturday nights, I guess, or Friday, I don't know, whenever they are, we hear the race cars just loud and clear because it just echoes up there.
Yeah. Well, and Shanty always laughs at me because I kind of know how to get around most of the county. Even growing up where I grew up, a lot of my friends were from the Freetown area. So we ventured all over the hills and the hollers, running around. And there's an old abandoned county road out in that area that, we used to go and drive our trucks around on. And so I'll take her to what my old stomping grounds would have been, and she's kind of at a loss,
I didn't venture that way.
Yeah, she didn't venture to that end of the county, and it's kind of funny to see how some groups of kids are kind of stuck in their little areas.
Yeah, there's a lot of old roads and old roadbeds and stuff that run up through those ridges, and I run into people all the time that'll say, when I was a kid, we used to go from basically where my wife and I live now, all the way through the hills and the ridges to get to where you live now. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of old abandoned county roads out there, so you hear a lot of stories of people that would talk about, traveling up and down those ridges and in roads that no longer exist. And, I think it's a maintenance thing probably of why a lot of them went away, and I understand that. So you talked about graduating high school together. Tell me about what it was like to go to school together as, Jeremy Morrow and the high school version and Shanty, the high school version. How did you know each other? Were you friends? How did that come about?
Well, he was the first boyfriend I ever really had, and so I knew him that way. And then we broke up. Never really realized why we broke up until 2020, maybe something like that. But anyways, we just broke up, and we really didn't talk through high school. We both kind of hung out with two different areas. I was kind of sheltered in a sense that didn't do a whole lot besides doing sports and go to school, so I didn't really run around with a whole lot of people. So.
And that was 7th grade that we dated.
Yeah.
So, like I said before, I came to school in Brownstown at the elementary school in 5th grade. Another friend and I that, like I said, we were attending Sowers, and our parents switched us. So, and then get into middle school, and you get more interested in girls, and Shanty and I ended up dating in the 7th grade.
He was my first kiss.
First kiss. She and I went to some type of a dance together, like a Valentine's Day dance, and we've still got a picture from back then. And I was pretty cool in my silk shirt.
And a whole lot less beard.
Yeah, yeah. So then, like Shanty said, went through high school. And then, after high school, I pretty soon ended up with a couple kids. 19 and 20 was when I ended up with Ariel, our oldest daughter, and our only daughter, so she's our favorite daughter. And then Lane is our oldest son. Those were my kids from a previous marriage. And then Shanty had Aiden and Tucker. And then I'm going to let her elaborate a little bit more on her path after school there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go to college, and I didn't want to work in a factory. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This is not what I wanted to do. So in that essence, I just went to the military, got married right out of high school, and went to the Marine Corps for about 7 years. And then when I came home, had 2 kids, and then...
And then that's kind of where our story picks back up.
Mm-hmm.
So go to school together, end up, she married another one of our classmates who we have a great relationship with, still to this day. They have 2 kids, and they separate. So then 2012 was when we reconnected.
Yeah, he rolled up in the bar and rubbed his beard on me, and that was all she wrote.
So just to keep elaborating on that, we got back together pretty soon after. We kind of bumped into each other, and
we just never really quit talking.
She was single for 3 years. And then I come in and rubbed my beard on her, and the rest was history.
Well, it sounds to me like almost sounds like destiny, almost like it was meant to be. I know you both grew up in large families. I've met both of you have a lot of siblings, and I've had the privilege to meet most of them. What was it like growing up in large family household for both of you?
Oh man, for me, I was the oldest of 4. I had 2 younger brothers. Corey is, I guess, 4 years younger than me, and Jordan is just another year younger than him. And then there was a 4th one that we call Kaylee a surprise, but she's the baby of 4, and she likes to think she's in charge, and you've met her, so
yeah.
you know that to be true. But as an older brother, we had a lot of fun. We kind of ran wild. We were all different in our own rights. Corey was kind of the homebody. Me and Jordan were out in the woods. Corey'd follow us. We followed Dad around, farmed, grew up on a little farm, did some row crop, did some vegetable farming, produce. Dad had a little stand along Highway 50 for a long time at what was my great-grandpa's place. So did a lot of riding on the fender of a tractor, which learned a lot riding on the fender of a tractor, listening to Dad holding the flashlight, a lot of that one-on-one time that you get asked all the questions with Dad. So it's funny because there are pictures at one time, Mom worked full-time, Dad had a job and then was farming too, but he had an old Alice Chalmers 200 with a factory cab on it. And in the front corner of the cab, there was a board bolted in and a baby seat bolted to that. And that's where Jordan would ride, and he would hold my younger brother Corey on his knee, and there was a board across the back of the tractor that was my territory. So I felt pretty lucky. I got the whole back of the cab that I could run back and forth, and we would go out and we would ride with Dad in the tractor just all day, and he'd pack a cooler with bottles and food, and we'd go, and we farmed. And that's some of my better childhood memories is on the tractor.
Yeah, I've had the privilege to kind of get to know all three of your siblings and get to know your mom and your dad and your grandma. And they're just so warming and such great people. When I'm around them, they almost make me feel like I'm an adopted Morrow.
Mm-hmm.
When you have...
you kind of are.
I kind of am a little bit. But your dad, Brad, shout out to B-Rad. I love to give him a hard time. I think he loves to give me a hard time as much. And but no, when I'm around all of them, they make you feel like family. There's a huge personality difference in all four of you when I hang around you. But what's cool is four completely different personalities, but you're all really, really close. And I love that. And your grandma she's one of a kind.
Uh-huh.
And it's awesome. I love to hear those stories of how people grew up and how their families. And Shanty, you grew up in a big family too. You've got several siblings.
Yeah. It was honestly, growing up, it was me and my sister. I have an older brother. His name's Felipe. He actually grew up in another country, and so he moved up here when he was 21. So it was a little bit later that I had both siblings up here. So for my childhood, it was me and Irene together, and we ran through the woods. We ran through the pastures. My Aunt Patty had a golf cart, and we'd run through the pastures, and we just had a lot of fun with her. And we'd make mudslides. Like, we did whatever we could. We lived out in the country. There was nothing really off limits. So.
Couple of hillbilly kids.
Yeah, basically. Like, I loved one of my favorite things to do was like trying to find the kittens that were in the barn, and they were always in the nooks and crannies and stuff. So I loved climbing around the barn and
cut a lot of firewood with her grandpa.
Oh yeah, that was my summer thing from like 7 years old until I could actually go get a real job. I cut wood with my grandpa.
Yeah, you touched on it just a little bit, and one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is you guys have done so many cool things to get where you are, and there's been a lot of things that you've done that have made you who you are, and is now a reflection on your business. And I'm excited to get into the business side of it. That's going to be a large portion of this podcast. It seems like the episode 1, episode 2 is more music related, some of the music stuff that we got going on in Brownstown. But this episode and the next few episodes are going to be more small business oriented, and I'm really excited about that. As a small business owner myself, you don't just start a business one day without having a rhyme or reason, a background, or something that guided you down that path. So what I want to talk to you guys about is I want to go back to where, Shanty, you got out of school, you went in the military. Jeremy, you worked several different jobs, always been farming, construction type, outdoor minded. Shanty, tell me about going in the Marines, because I don't know that very many people know that about you. And I think that is completely awesome. But just tell me about being in the Marines and what your role was, how long you were in the Marines, and some of the things that you learned, and how your personality is affected by that today.
So actually, I started out in the Army. Well, nobody really knows that because that was a really short stint. And then the guy that I was dating in high school that I ended up being my first marriage, his cousin had joined the Marine Corps. And I just remember this day when he was like, yeah, you couldn't do that. And I was like, bet, And then 2 weeks later, I was in boot camp. So I had switched from the Army to the Marine Corps. And then I thought, what in the world did I just do? Because my ex-husband at the time was still in the Army, so I wasn't sure. I was a really bad, prideful thing that I did, but it ended up working out. I really had an attitude of, nobody's going to tell me what to do now, right?
Yeah.
So I went in. I was a generator mechanic, learned how to do all that. And then my most favorite job was I was a combat instructor. So when they go in, they go to boot camp, and then their next training session is like 22 days out in the field teaching them like weapons and tactics and stuff. That's what I did for the next 4 years. Right before I got out, so.
More of the guidance of almost drill sergeant-esque.
Yes, very much so. So I had a really hard time transitioning from being a combat instructor to being a civilian.
Yeah.
Like, just in general, because, my gosh. Looking back, I'm like, wow, I treated people like crap. But that was my role, right? I had to make them hard, but I look back and I was like, that's not me no more, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, and she doesn't ever see, and I get more of the depth from her about her time in. And Shanty is very, I don't know how you say it if it's not passive, but she doesn't give herself she's not going to pat herself on the back.
Right.
Okay? So to be a female combat instructor is not like super common. They picked her for a reason.
Yeah.
And then the amount of work that she did, like the cycles, and I want her to elaborate on some of that because, man, she busted her butt. I always laugh and joke, like everybody at work calls her the boss lady, right? And at times she hates that title. But everybody knows that when she steps up, like, psh, that's it. Like you don't go any higher than her.
Well, being a really good friend of yours, both of you, I know you, Shanty, is one of the kindest souls that I think I've ever met. But there is a drill sergeant switch, and I've seen it, and I love it. I love it. It's so awesome. I've actually been in trouble for flipping that switch a couple times.
You have a few times, but hey, it was fun.
Yeah, but no, I don't think anybody out there knows you today as Drill Sergeant Shanty. I
had to work really hard for that because
it's not easy.
No.
When you're in the Marines.
I was using the F-bomb like it was a pronoun, verb, and adjective. Like I knew no difference.
You were the female Bobby Knight.
Yeah, basically.
First of all, you got to be a badass to be in the Marines, and then to be a woman in the Marines in that role. That's even, in my opinion, that's even more badass.
Well, I think the hardest part is just like, you don't realize it until you get out, but like how much you really have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's some of the hardest stuff.
So do you feel like that chip on your shoulder carried forward throughout your life a little bit?
Yeah, it did for sure up until probably my late 20s. And then I was like, who the heck am I?
I have found that people that are ultra successful have always had some sort of little chip on their shoulder. And I know with me personally, just tell me I can't do something. Man, right. You want to motivate me? Tell me I can't do something.
You heard my story with like how I got in the Marine Corps. Like, don't tell me I can't do something because I'll show you I can.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of that just probably comes from, I don't know, being in the Marine Corps probably.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they tell you can't do it. I'll show you I can do it.
And Jeremy, you, after high school, tell me about your kind of the jobs and the career path that you had coming out of school.
Man, I worked all over. I didn't have a path.
Or a plan?
Or a path or a plan. I was just working. I had 2 young kids. So it was just where could I go to make the most money? what was going to get more food on the table, what was going to get me more time at home. So I did a little bit of everything. Oh, shoot, I worked in an industrial laundry that my dad had a laundry at the time. I worked stocking vending machines. I worked in a factory local there. I worked at Ison for a little bit. Just a little bit of everything, and nothing just ever really sparked me. And then I got the opportunity to work at a local construction company, excavation company, and really, really enjoyed that. And I'd always kind of had an eye for that type of stuff, just watching that type of equipment. Never really had a path, and then was able to get a job there, which led me to working through a union hiring hall over, how many years was it?
2005, I think.
Yeah, so probably 7 years. 13 years probably. Just doing that kind of work. And in that time was some of the most fun that I ever had. Was pushed pretty early in my career to learn how to run cranes, and wasn't really given a choice. That's what I was just kind of told I was going to do. So I did it, and worked at the Madison Powerhouse on a couple different projects there. Worked at the Madison Bridge, floating around on a barge out in the middle of the river down there. Some of the most fun that I had there on that project was running a big crawler crane out on the middle of the river on a barge, pulling pieces of the old bridge out of the river after they demoed it. So Shanty and the kids got to come down and watch, and they blasted it and dropped the main section in the middle of the river. Well, then we had to take our crane out on a barge. Divers would go down in the water, hook up to a piece of demo, and we don't see it. We just start pulling on it. And that's some of the most fun that I ever had on that project.
Yeah, but as a crane operator, they don't just throw somebody in there. I mean, you got to take some training and some certification to be in these cranes. And you can explain this better than I can, but you were in, when I think of cranes, the biggest of the biggest cranes, like these big, huge tower cranes that do like the bridge over the Ohio River, these big, huge tower cranes that you see maybe on like a skyscraper. Mm-hmm. That's the type of crane that you're that you was in, correct?
At that time, no. Think of a dozer track, and that's we're running the big what they call a lattice boom style crane. So it's a crane that should be on land that they put on a barge, and it's floating in the middle of the river. Mm-hmm. Got a tugboat tied to it, and that's how we move around. So, but yes, I did actually run some tower crane on the East End Bridge down at Louisville, and that was one of those things. There weren't very many guys that did that. And the draw to it for me was I would always get annoyed when I was sitting in the barge on the crane. And as a crane operator, if you don't have anything to do, you put your feet up, read the newspaper, read a magazine, read a book, whatever. You just whatever, right? And that was always kind of the cool thing, that when I was running that dirt equipment and you cruise past the crane operator, here you are dusty and gritty and nasty and your back hurts. And you look over and here's this old cowboy got his feet up, and they're crossed, and he's got the cowboy hat down over his face and not a care in the world. And I thought, man, that's what I want to do.
How do I get that job?
How do I get that job, right?
Yeah.
And those guys, man, they run the job. And that was always, I want to do that. Like, I want everybody to know who I am. And those guys made more money, right? Like, they made the best money out there. So why wouldn't I want that?
And answer the obvious question for my boys that are going to listen to this.
Uh-huh.
Every time we see one of those cranes, as the boys were growing up and kids, and they'd say, "Dad, how do they get up there?" There's no elevator. You got to climb that thing, right?
You got to climb that.
So afraid of heights is something you cannot have.
No, and that was the big draw to the tower crane was I could get up there, right? Because when you were down on the ground, just any old body wanted to come talk to the crane operator.
Yeah.
Because he was that guy on the job.
Yeah, but once you get up there, you're isolated, so you don't have to set. Like,
that was my thing, right? Like, I can get up here and nobody knows what I'm doing, right? I can kick my shoes off. I can just
not be bothered
and not be bothered. So that's what landed me in the seat of a tower crane, and there weren't very many guys that did it, and I wanted to do that.
I never knew that side of why you wanted to get in that crane. But my story, a little bit of how I became a surveyor, is it has a lot of similarities. I would go to work with my dad on Saturdays in coal mine, and I would see how black and dirty and how hard my grandpa would work. And then he'd take me to the engineering office or the mine superintendent office on Saturday, and I'd sit in there with all the surveyors and the engineers, and I'd see how clean they were, how clean their office were, and I'd see all their fancy equipment, and it didn't take them long. They kind of took me under their wing. It was, up until that point, I thought I was just going to go down the same path. I thought I was going to be a coal miner.
Yeah.
And then I thought, man, wait a minute. These guys seem to know a little something that the other guys don't know. Yep. They've got it figured out, and they kind of showed me that, what surveying was about. And so went down that path. But you're a lot like me, is you quickly notice that there's two sides of this job on this site. Yep. There's the guys that know something and make a little better money, and I quickly figured that out. Kind of went down the path of surveying.
Well, people would always give me a hard time. Are you going to do anything today? Or I can't believe that you make so much money for as little as you do. And I'd say, listen, I don't get paid for the amount of what I do. I get paid for how good I can do what I do. Right. Well, and the solitude, that kind of reminds me of surveying as well. So you kind of had that status on the job site, but then you got up there and you found the solitude of being in that crane and not being bothered. Surveying's the same way. Mm-hmm. If I can take that phone and throw it in the glove compartment and get out in the woods and be a surveyor, man, that's when the peace hits me and I'm in my groove. Yep. So I get everything you're saying about that.
And it's funny you say that, because that's kind of what geared me towards like doing the administrative part of stuff, because in the Marine Corps, you either just did what you were told or you figured out how to be the leader. And I wanted to be the leader. I didn't want to be the person being told what to do all the time, because the planning part to me seemed more fun, and you're in the office and not in the heat all the time. So I'm going to do the best I can to do this because it just looked like more fun. So then after I got out, I went to NDOT, worked there for a hot minute, and then DCS, and then I got my bachelor's degree. So it was funny how we ended up together. Like, he had the dirt side of the business down. I had the administrative of the part down. It's funny how, God put us together and didn't realize we were going to be a powerhouse.
Perfect match of skills and abilities kind of coming together. So let's talk now about the decision to start what is S&J. You both came from different backgrounds, but what Shanty just said, you both had different skill sets. Mm-hmm. One of the things, before I go to that, if I could stop and back up just a second, talk about the cosmetology side, because you were really, really talented at that. I know a lot of ladies. My wife was extremely disappointed at different times, and I know a lot of people at town whenever you said, I'm not doing this anymore, and me and Jeremy are going this construction side. I don't think we talked about that. So.
No.
Well, that kind of happened after.
So it actually happened after we started our business. So S&J was actually there first, but I was staying at home at that point. I think since I quit working for the state in 2015, and 2015 stayed home, and then 2016 we actually went on a mission trip, and after a mission trip decided to start our business, and then 2017 is when I went to school to do hair stuff.
And did very well at it. I know there was a lot of people, it was by appointment, but there was a lot of people in town that was disappointed whenever you hung that side of it up.
I loved it. I really love doing hair, and I love the friendship and the, just having that relationship with so many awesome women that, live in Jackson County. I mean, I had some people drive from Indy and Louisville and everywhere in between, but, my most loyal ones, were obviously the most closest here. And I just got to the point, with our business, it just got so busy that I didn't want to be like, I'm sorry, I got to reschedule all the time because we got too busy, and I had to do what was best for us, and so I had to hang that up.
So take me through the thought process of the nights. I'm sure, because you don't just wake up one day and say, we're going to start a business.
Right.
Take me through the thought process of planning this, hashing this out, kind of developing this plan of we're going to jump out of this boat with 2 feet and we're going to make this happen. What took you down that path? What was the decisions that you ultimately made? What brought S&J to life?
Oh, man.
Just a lot of things, really. We knew we wanted to have more of our freedom. You know, after I was a stay-at-home mom for like a year before we started our business, it was just like, gosh, Jeremy's gone a lot. You know, there'd be sometimes he'd be gone 15, 18 hours a day because his drive would be 2 hours, and then he'd be at work for 12 hours because it's a construction industry. And it was like, we need to do something to get him here, you know, like, so we made sure like we didn't have any debt. So, you know, like we didn't have to worry about paying ourselves at first. So that was kind of our first and main priority when we started our business, to make sure that we didn't have to worry about ourselves in that sense.
And that's the drive was killing me. The time apart that we were spending, you know, there were times that I would leave at, 2 a.m.
Or stay the night in the crank because he had to work 2 shifts. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
There was a lot of that. So we were just getting tired of it. And I looked around the county at the time, and some of the smaller guys were retiring, right? They were kind of hanging it up, and they were slowing down. Some of the medium-sized guys were getting bigger, and I saw there was going to be what I thought was going to be a hole in kind of the market, right? So we had some conversation. We had some good friends that we asked some questions to, and just, kind of weighed the options there, and found a local bank that would work with a couple people that just didn't have a whole lot of money in the bank, but had a few assets, and we loaned some money and bought a gooseneck trailer that was broken. We brought it home with 3 of the 4 sets of tires attached. One of them was not on, so brought that home, and then from the same gentleman that we bought the broken gooseneck trailer from, we brought a broken backhoe too. So we loaned money to buy broken equipment to start a business.
But we knew, though, Jeremy had the skills to work on it, and I felt bad, so I stayed out, and I was handing him tools until he was done to make sure, like, he can get done quicker. But, like, we were out in the shop just about every night fixing something just to go the next day.
Do you guys ever sit and think, it wasn't that long ago, it was me and you, a bank loan, no guaranteed paycheck, and a broken gooseneck and a broken backhoe? Mm-hmm. Is that ever? And when you put it like that, and listen, and I think every small business, I don't think people who've never ran a business realize the risk that us small business owners take.
And not only risk, but the sacrifice.
Yeah, and there's a lot that I've got on my list to talk about that. But, you're sitting out there and you're looking at 2 pieces of broken down equipment and taking on a loan to start a business. And there's a part of you that says, what am I doing? But the drive just kicks in. Mm-hmm. I know in talking to a lot of small business owners who've been successful that you don't focus on that. You just get intense in your drive and you make it happen. And I know you guys have, but that's crazy to think about where it started.
Well, and you asked, do you guys think back on that a lot? I think we do, but I think we should more.
Yeah. There's definitely a stop and smell the roses type deal. I know I don't do, mm-hmm. and I should. And I know I could probably speak for a lot of small business owners that don't. And I think the reason why a lot of small business owners that have made it is because that's what's made them successful. It's that drive. Mm-hmm. It's that what's next? What do I got to do tomorrow? What do I got to do next week? What do I got to do to keep this thing going, to keep the wheels on this thing? There's no time. I know I don't have time to stop and ponder and reflect.
It's a lot of trust, though, right? Like, I wholeheartedly trust Jeremy, and if he tells me he's going to do something, I trust he's going to do it. So if I doubt it, then I place doubt in him. We're not going to get anywhere. So
yeah,
he calls me Positive Patty all the time, but it's just who I am.
That's one of the things that the people who know you know this for a fact but maybe the people listening to this podcast don't know this about you, Jeremy, and that is what Shanty just said. When you say you're going to do something, you're going to do something.
Yeah.
That is your reputation. Both of you are a no BS. There's no time for BS. You're two of the most humble people I know. You're two of the most real people I know. But you are also two of the least to put up with BS.
Yeah.
And there's success that's come from that as well.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's. Why do we have time for that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't need it. It's not going to get us anywhere. I'd rather you just shoot me straight and tell me how it is and how it's going to be. Then we can just establish where we stand, right?
Yeah.
And that's just, Shanty's a lot like that. We
kind of talk about our no quit attitude. Like, there's just no quit in us. Like how do you quit something you started? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're going to fail. You're going to fall down, but you get back up too. So like, that's just part of it.
All businesses are days of failure, right?
Oh,
you don't win. Not every day is a win.
Right? I wish it was.
Yeah. And so what I try to focus on is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, instead of it being 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Mm-hmm. That's what I try to focus on is, sometimes progress is slow, but as long as every time you take a step back, there's 2 steps forward to make up for that.
But I think when you anticipate that, right, like, it's going to happen. Like, it's better to find the joy in the day than worry about that because it's just going to be there the next day anyways.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to be happy.
So when you started S&J, what was your focus point on service area? What type of work you wanted to do in the early stages?
Man, in the early stages, so it's S&J excavation and concrete. I put concrete on the door because it was another source of revenue, not because I knew a whole lot about it or because I loved it. What we did starting out was we focused, we would take any job. We weren't going to turn anything down, but we really focused on kind of the homeowner. That's where we got our start, the residential customer. One of our first jobs was a little driveway expansion with a little retaining wall and a little sidewalk, super small. Did as much of it as we could, and we were in the boulevards of Seymour when I tell you this. We did as much of it as we could with a backhoe.
Yeah.
And it was not fun. It was not ideal.
And the whole time you're trying to sell this to the client that you really know what you really know what you're doing.
Yeah. There's that whole fake it till you make it, right? But right. Looking back, there was a lot of fake it till you make it with us, but the core of that was a lot of faith it until you make it, because we had faith. The good Lord was going to provide for us. So we just got out and we just got busy, right? And like I said, there wasn't any job that we wouldn't take. And some of the more off-the-wall stuff was what we loved to do. I know I got a job out around Spraytown one time, and there was a guy that I knew, and that's really what our core was the folks that we knew, right? But like this guy gave me a job just because he knew me, and we did unconventional stuff, right? Like there was a concrete bridge that was originally poured over top of a culvert, and the culvert was washed out, and like we've got an off-road buggy that you've seen, that we enjoy to take out. It's a Jeep. And I took that thing over there and like pulled old culvert out, and we put new culvert in. But had this guy not known me, I would have never got the job, right? Because if you go in and try and tell somebody this wacky story of how you're just going to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I'm coming to pull your culvert out with a Jeep.
And some of this stuff just didn't come up until I was in the middle of it. Like I'm a lot of jump into it chest deep and figure it out as you go kind of guy. And I think it served me well, but you can't tell the customer that that's what you're there to do, right? I think
that was our beginnings, though. We're not like that now.
and you're very right.
If you call S&J tomorrow, have a culvert replaced, they will not be bringing a Jeep out.
We might, but it works.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've always said too is, if it works, it's not stupid.
Well, we also bought a FedEx truck because it was cheaper than buying a pipe truck. We turned it into a pipe truck, and everybody thinks it's fabulous.
And
we
that's,
do too.
we've always kind of done different zany stuff. Like you've seen it. We had a 6-wheel drive military dump truck one time that we ran around.
Oh
right?
yeah,
So-
when you guys got started, I never knew what I was going to find in your driveway when I pulled in. And it's like, where did you find that? Well, we drove to Virginia, or we drove to Georgia, we picked this up.
And you can talk about that too, because you were one of our first jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Like you've got a piece of property that Dan loves to tell this story.
I've got it wrote down here, and I don't know, probably the two of us can share telling this story together. But so this is how I met you, and this same timeline. Well, we're at the timeline of S&J just getting started, getting off its feet. And my wife, Angela, and Shanty were friends because of our youngest boys. We're friends through preschool. And so they knew each other from the boys and preschool and just being moms. Yep. But you and I didn't know each other.
Nope.
And
I get a call from Shanty one day, and she's like, "Hey, do you know Dan and Angela Bland?" And I said, "Nope, I don't think I do." And she said, "Well, Ange and I are good friends, and Chase, Tucker's little friend." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't really know him."
Well, actually, I think Dan was coaching Tucker at the time, weren't you?
I think I was. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And it may have been. And she says, "Well, they're looking for somebody to do some work."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, perfect." So I said, I think I called you.
Yeah.
And we set up a time.
Or the wives set up a date or a time.
Right, but I was still working for somebody else at that time.
Okay.
When I'd taken that phone call, I was still working for someone else.
Right. So I remember that. And so we bought a piece of property that, we call it diamond in the rough now. But when I bought that property, I don't think anybody wanted it. It was rough. It was rough. And, it was one of the most abused pieces of property that I think I had ever witnessed in Jackson County. And I tell this story. My grandparents came back from Florida, and they pulled in, and I told them I'd bought it. My grandma started crying. And she said, "Please tell me you didn't buy this place."
It looked like a tornado.
Yeah, and then some.
Yeah.
A tornado and then a nuclear bomb.
Yeah,
and,
it was rough.
And I knew this thing was going to be a challenge. But Ann said, "Hey, why don't we get my friend Shanty? They're trying to start a little business and get this going." And I don't know if you and I talked to each other on the phone or if our wives set it up, but I will never forget that day because I pulled in, and this is what I see. I see this old, like
Saturn.
Geo Saturn or what, this old junk car, and I'm like, God, what do we got here? I honestly thought somebody was just broke down along the road. I thought it was just some old junk car that had pulled into our driveway and broke down, and I was almost like, God, I gotta get this guy out of here. So I gotta meet this. I got to meet this construction guy coming. I got to get this guy out of here. And then you step out, and the last thing you want to do, you don't want to be that type of person that judges a book by its cover. But out steps this guy with this, 18-inch beard and tattoos up his arms. And I'm thinking,
I'm about to get beat up.
I'm about to get robbed and beat up out in the middle of nowhere here. And, and then all of a sudden it's this, you see this guy's, big smile and big face, and he sticks his hand out there, and I'm Jeremy Morrow. How can I help you? And I'm like, well, okay. So you're standing there, just complete confidence. And I'm thinking, I think I remember asking you, do you have any equipment? No. Okay. We can rent some.
Yep. Yep.
So
we walked around, and you kind of gave me the ballpark of, I want a driveway here. Can we make it work? What do you want to do here? What's your plan? We just kind of kicked that stuff around. And you're right, we didn't have any equipment. So through that, we rented a piece of equipment from a local rental yard. And And then I borrowed a bulldozer.
Yeah, and the part about that I didn't know at the time, and you guys have told me since then, is you didn't even have a fuel tank. You didn't have any way of getting diesel to the site.
Nope, had a pickup truck.
Hey, we just figured it out.
Yeah,
But the confidence in talking to you that first day, I remember going home and telling my wife, like, this is going to be great. I think they really know. I met him, and I was a little worried about it at first, but I think this is going to work out okay.
Yeah, gave you a quote cheap enough that I talked you right into it.
I couldn't say no.
Yeah, and that's how we got a lot of our jobs when we first started, was just oversell the confidence, and did we know that we could do it? No. Were we going to figure it out? Yeah, and there wasn't going to be anything that stopped us.
Yeah, and I think it made me feel comfortable knowing that when I pitched these crazy ideas that I had to you for this property, you kind of saw my dream.
I saw the vision of what you were trying to get done.
Yeah, and that made me feel so much better because, up until that point, the only person that had seen that was my wife and I.
Yeah.
Everybody just kind of thought we were dumb. But when I ran it by you, there was confidence in it.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And it made me feel like, well, maybe this isn't so dumb.
Yeah, I could see the plan and the end result. And
Jeremy loved doing that kind of work when we first started too, is the clearing and just be like him being up in the tower crane, being an excavator by himself out there. Like this was, we're out in the middle of the nowhere.
I loved it, and I could see where you were trying to get, and to be kind of on the forefront of that with you, and then to see how you've played that plan out there. It was almost to the T of how you envisioned it and how the property lays out now. And that's been a joy for us is you've always kind of called us for that stuff and just kind of said, this is what I see, and then you would turn me loose, and that's what I loved.
Well, the thing I loved about it is when you guys were out there working on that very first job, and you're in the early stages. And when I say early stages, I mean within the first months of the beginning of S&J. I came out there one day, and I think you were running a piece of equipment, Shanty was running a piece of equipment, and your sons were all out there pitching riprap. And I knew right then, I was like, this is special. They're going to be successful. And seeing your kids learn firsthand of what hard work was, and seeing both of you in equipment.
They really enjoyed it. It was really cool too. It was a special relationship too, because all three of our boys are the same age as all three of your boys, so they all were friends as well.
Yeah.
So
And all six boys learned so much from from us being in business. Not only us being in business, but just all of them being around, your boys included, watching those interactions, and our boys being around you and watching those interactions with your boys, and when I say interactions, I mean generally the oldest two getting chewed on by my old dad.
We could do an entire podcast on bringing in our oldest two sons.
Oh my.
And just putting them on each side of this table. And I don't know that we probably even want a lot of that going public of what. I'm sure they'd love to tell their stories of what it's like to work for their old man.
Maybe they'll put that in our in the books that they write about us later.
If nothing else, we bring it in and we record it. Maybe we don't make it public. We just record it and save it. And that's one we look back on one day.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I talked about with Justin Underwood last time he was here, is how this stuff is kind of timeless. Our kids are going to play this, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, our grandkids. And I know, you're a papaw now.
Yeah.
And, over Christmas, we dug out some of my grandma's old VHS tapes and cassette tapes and was able to play those. And, to hear my dad's voice and seeing my grandpa at a, much earlier age and how just so many memories came back, and what goes on the internet is forever. So we'll cut this podcast, we'll put it on, and it'll be out there forever. So it'll be fun to look back and play that. And
we sure love Paisley. Something special.
Well,
and it's so cool too, because we, earlier in our story, we told you we came together, at 30 years old. I had 2 young boys. He had 2 young boy and girl. So we blended our families, and, Ariel was 10 or 11 when we got together. So I didn't ever have a girl. I never had a girl to shop for as a baby. So this was my first time. So it's been pretty cool.
You were a boy mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my wife talks about that a lot. Being a boy mom is what's it gonna be like when there's a girl in our household to look after.
Yeah, Mama Shanty doesn't hold back.
We stop at all the baby clothes every time.
Yeah, she thoroughly enjoys having a baby girl to shop for.
Yeah.
And I love having a baby girl to just
spoil a little bit.
Yeah,
best thing about them is just you spoil them and then you get to send her home.
Absolutely.
We talk a lot about family, and when we started, and we talked about how your boys were out there helping you on projects and how close you are. But you, to this day, you have a lot of family that's a part of S&J.
Oh man, yeah.
And so it's a conversation itself. Is your dad, your sister, I believe.
Yep.
And
both my sisters.
2 of Shanty's sisters.
My nephew.
Your nephew.
Our son.
Yeah.
So this is a family business.
Oh yeah.
And
Are we miss anybody?
Yeah. Leave somebody out. There's so many. But tell me what that's like. Tell me what that's like to work with a lot of your family members that you've hired to come on and make this thing work.
I think it's done well.
I think it's done very well because regardless of if they're family or not, everybody's family for us there because everybody's treated like family. So it's even more of a blessing that, our family gets to work with us every day on top of our friends that now have become family.
Well, and I think, so we stayed close like that by design, right? Those folks have a vested interest in us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's special about family. And nobody in our family that works for us has ever pulled the family card. Never once have they ever done that. They show up 110% and they bust their butts right alongside with us because they believe in us and they love being a part of it. Right. And I talk. And even the folks that aren't family that work for us currently are folks that we knew, that we had some type of a previous relationship with, whether they were friends or I had worked with them, whatever it was. I think just about everybody that works there currently.
There has been a previous relationship, but it, they also had the skill set to go along with that. So that made it even more special that, we have those people.
For the most part. But we've been willing to take, like Shanty's sister, her older sister is a great example. Irene, when she came to us, I just knew that she was going to show up and she was going to bust her butt. And she didn't even know what a crescent wrench was at that time. And now she's like, our safety coordinator. Mm-hmm. She's working. She's, Irene's a great example. She started with us, and Shanty's right. She didn't know what a crescent wrench was. We took her to a job in Indianapolis. She didn't know how to do nothing. It was a concrete job. She didn't know how to do nothing with concrete, right? But she was willing to show up and bust her butt every day and learn, and she did, right? And we've always been willing to take a chance on somebody who will just show up.
Yeah,
right.
And bust their butt.
And
then my other sister, Cheyenne, she's 20 years younger than me. She started with me because she was going to hair school as well. She was going to take over my little hair shanty that I had at the house, and she was going to do hair. She was at the hair school in Seymour, and unfortunately the guy that ran it passed away, so it went out of business. And she was like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, I need help. You want to come help me? And at the time, she was working at a nursing home, and she's like, yeah, I'll give it a try. And she's just done phenomenal, too. She's created, I give them a task, and they just go figure it out. You know what I mean? Because there was a point in our business where we just kind of had to tell some of our lead people, like, I don't know. You're just going to have to figure it out because we can't figure it out on our own. Yeah. We can't do this all on our own. So I think that was a...
and that's... We've had people that have just been willing to figure it out with us, right? Because we can't do it all.
Or know it all.
My dad started out in the field with me, and Dad's not a concrete finisher, and Dad's not his career path wouldn't check the box for laborer until he came to work for me. But in the early days, I would call him when I needed help here and there, right? Like Dad's handy enough; he could get down in there and do it. He just wasn't skilled at that, right? So, like I said, growing up on a farm, he had some knowledge. He could move some equipment around. He could pull a trailer. He could work with his hands. He's a decent carpenter. So I'd drag Dad along with me in the early days.
Well, and the good thing about Brad, too, was he did have another job, so we didn't have to have another full-time employee at the time. Although we wanted him, it wasn't needed. And there was a lot of people like that helped us, part-time until, like, we really needed that. And then they either came on board or someone else came along.
And like Shanty said, we've grown enough now that Irene and my dad have both transitioned into a safety role. And I laugh and joke and tell everybody that I had to do that with my dad or he was going to kill himself, or just whatever. So it made good sense. He had an office background, corporate background prior to starting with us. So now he's kind of the director of our safety stuff, and Irene's the same way. She works under Brad there as a safety coordinator. She'll still get in the field and do some field work for us.
She can't just sit still.
Yeah, she's she's just not a sit still kind of person. And Lane, our oldest son, and Shanty's nephew David both work for us in the field and are just superb operators. Right, like because of the businesses, we've had you do some work for us, and you've got to see these boys up on these job sites, and it just the fact that I get to see my son at work, and I get to go to lunch with my dad, and see them every day, and see them be successful, and figure out problems and work through that stuff. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, we share that in common. So I get having family that, has at the end of the day, you've got somebody that has your best interest.
Yeah.
My dad came to work for me right after I started my business. And, that was some special time. Him working for me was, how it's kind of weird when your dad works for you. But he kind of learned to play that role. And then now your son and
it's kind of right though what you say. You kind of have to play that role. Like,
yeah.
Like you have to recognize who's in charge, regardless of what the age is, and
right.
Everybody has to stay in their own lane and realize like we're just trying to be a puzzle piece to get this puzzle put together.
Yeah,
right. And being a dad, I can respect what I know about your dad and how he played the role in the business for you, and kind of the same as the way my dad approaches it, right? Because he doesn't offer opinion if I don't ask for it from him when it comes to work stuff, because he knows that he's filled that role.
Yeah.
And that's, I really appreciate that. And it's harder for us sometimes, I think, as parents to remember at work that our son is our son.
Yeah.
But here he's still our son. We love him, but he's not getting any breaks because of who he is to us. And we, at one point, actually fired our oldest son
when he was a teenager.
When he was a teenager, because we felt like he needed a little wake up or some motivation, whatever it is, and we let him go and told him, go work some other jobs for some other people and get a taste of that, and then you can reapply and you can be considered to come back.
Yeah, and I've got so much respect for that, because I don't think people realize just how hard that is to do.
No, it's hard to be a parent and a boss because they're not going to look at you the same as someone else. So it was really important too that happened, because it made us see like, okay, new rule. Our kids, when you graduate high school, go work somewhere else and figure out if you really want to come back here. So we have a senior right now that, he wants to be an operator, and, he's like, I'm going to go test out the waters and see what's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have the same conversations at home. Last week was my son Brady's spring break, so I had both boys working for me all week. And those conversations happen a lot. Is like, when it's Monday through Friday and the dad relationship turns to employee boss, it's not personal. When we get out of here, we're dad and son, and I love you like no other, but I'm not going to treat you any different. When we're out working, and we've both gone through that. We share that with our businesses. We both have that in common.
Well, and the funny thing about kids is you're growing with them.
Yeah.
And so the early days of working with my son, because, let's face it, when they were little and they were kind of all in the house, Tucker was a wee little tyke.
He was 2.
He was a little bitty dude.
Yeah, so when we got together, Tucker was 2. Tucker was almost 2.
When we started business, though, he was 6.
Yeah.
And we've got pictures of him, and I bought him this little micro shovel that fit him, but all those boys and even our daughter were expected that if I needed help
on the weekends or whatever,
if I needed help with a job in the evenings or the weekends, that was my labor force, and from those times to now, I've grown in how I deal with employees and kids. And back in when we were younger as a company, man, those kids and your kids too, because you've grown, and I've watched you grow with your kids, and man, they took some chewings. I believe that the difference is we've raised some good men.
Yeah,
and I think being part of being a band is you got to take some chewings, and I caught a lot of that from the old heads back when I was running, because there were old boomers that some of those crane operators, they'd throw stuff at you if you got out of line, and you didn't backtalk those kind of guys.
Yeah. Has it surprised you, or has it gone according to plan on how fast the business has grown?
I would say it's kind of surprised us, because every winter, I'm sure everybody that's in this situation, it's like, oh my gosh, are we going to have enough work? We're going to have enough work. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we have too much work. How are we going to do this? And we're going to have enough people. And I mean, it's just like, it's up and down, there, like the construction world, there's no like fluidity.
Yeah, it's really hard. But as far as the growth of the company, I would agree with Shanty. It's just been, we tried to keep reins on it. And
it's like, how do you keep a reins on something?
I don't think it was possible. And we've never wanted to pass up opportunity.
Right.
So we've always tried to seize every single opportunity when it comes.
Well, and every time we tried to, like, okay, let's chill out for a minute, it was like, if you aren't growing, you're dying. And that's kind of how we felt. Like, we started feeling choked, and we was like, okay, let's try, like, you just can't. Yeah. It's like there's this animal out there rolling, and like we just got to keep feeding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to pull back the reins when the horse wants to run.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's kind of out of our control. But
I saw something on Facebook a while back. Somebody had posted, and man, it hit home. And I see if I can get this right, but it said, running a small business is learning to live with a level of stress that would kill most people.
Yeah.
And man, I felt that.
Yeah.
I always, and I shouldn't joke, but I always tell my sisters, man, if I die at a young age, you'll know why. It's because I'm stressed.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest misconception of people out there who don't know what it's like to run a small business and just how hard it is. I talked to a friend of both of ours, Dave Hall, about that last week, about just how difficult it is. I mean, there's a reason why 50-60% of all businesses fail in the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Well, and there was also another study that said that if you don't have God in your life, that your business probably isn't going to succeed as much as it would, and I just feel like with us, that's been
faith has played a huge part.
Because the other part of it too is he and I are together so much, and everybody is always like, how do you guys are always getting along? Like, we don't, but we love each other and we respect each other, and like that part's hard as well, because we are together all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a point that's taken straight off my list, Shanty, is you guys have a strong Christian faith, and I know you put so much faith in the Lord. You guys do so much giving back with missionaries and so forth, but there's a reason, and I think the faith that you have and the things that you do been a big part of your success.
I think also too, like you can't have a big head and expect to be blessed, right? So like when we recognize that this business wasn't really ran by us, it was more so ran by God, and we just kind of had to do what he said. That's when everything changed, and then it was like this wild horse that couldn't quit.
Yeah, we've to even do what we tried to do to get started, faith played a huge part of that. And without our faith, we would have absolutely crashed and burned. And
because it's scary, and there's a lot of fear that comes with it, because there's sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, but you're not going to know what's going to happen anyway. So
right.
You just had to get to a point of like, well, it's going to work because we didn't quit, right?
Yeah.
And like I talked, relationships have been a big thing. And our church family has stood behind us. We've worked for our church kind of early on even, they believed in us.
And a lot of church family also believed in us and, called us, and we did work for them. They call us in emergencies. That we're there.
Right.
So and then that, I just think being in good people just gets you farther than not being good people. And that's not even the point of it either, but it just happens naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Faith. The good Lord has absolutely blessed us.
Like, how could you be mean to a nice person, right? And like vice versa. So.
And we always like to tell our story about how God has blessed us in the hopes that people around us get it, But if it wasn't for the fact that we're able to give it up and let go of it, then this stuff would eat us up a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important not to identify with this is who I am in this business, because like, yes, I might be the president of this business, but that's not who I am. So, if the world came crashing down around my feet, like I can still move on because that's not who I am. And I think that mindset has gotten us pretty far.
Yeah. Being a, good friend of yours, the thing that I see the most is your faith has given you the ability to almost have no fear. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there's definitely a no fear approach that the two of you have. And I think that no fear approach that you have is because you have such a strong faith background.
Well, here's how I look at it, right? Like, yeah, it's going to really suck when I die, and I'm not on this earth no more, but I know if I do, what God tells me to do, I'm going to be in a better place. So it's a win-win whether I'm here or there.
And we've been able in business and in life to pick out those moments where we have felt that the good Lord has tipped his hat to us per se and said, this is from me. And you're right, there's no fear when you live for the Lord. And that's,
it's been a mindset change, though. It's not always been like that. It's
100%.
It's all of these trials and errors, and our failures in the last 9 years that, not everybody knows about, because who's going to tell everybody about all their failures? Like, nobody does that.
Well, and we love to fail. We fail a lot, but we don't quit.
Yeah,
right.
It's not
and
that
that's you're the same way. Like I've seen you fail at some stuff, but you're not a quitter. And that's, as a small business owner, it's uncomfortable.
You kind of have to have the mindset of you're gonna fail, because like, who doesn't fail? And if you think you're gonna be perfect every time and not move forward, like, I don't know. There was a time in, I don't remember what year it was, but Jeremy and I went skydiving, and that, if nobody's ever done that before, like, it gives you a whole nother perspective of what fear is, and you kind of become fearless. Jeremy and I got on the ground, looked at each other, and was like, you ready to do that again? So we went and bought tickets and went back up and did it again. And, we did a backflip out of the airplane. The guy let us pull our own chutes, and it was just like, oh my gosh, if I can jump out of an airplane when I'm scared to death of heights, like, what are they going to take from me when I'm already okay to go to heaven? So, like, you just kind of become fearless.
Yeah, and that's the major difference in you and I, Jeremy, is, we bounce a lot of things off of each other. Mm-hmm. But I see you as, the hell with it. Let's get in a plane, jump out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm the type of person that sits around and thinks about the elevation of the plane for 3 days. I need to read the safety manual and the parachute.
Yeah.
I got to know how we're going to get there, who's going to be in the plane.
Yeah.
That's the different. And that's what I love about
Well,
it.
like I told you earlier, I've always been that, let's just figure it out.
Yeah.
And we'll jump into it feet first, and we'll wade our way out of it. And, so some of that has just not thinking about it. Just do. Don't think, just do. Get in the middle of it and figure it out. And that's been a big part of our success. But God is not going to bless you while you're sitting on the couch.
Like, how can you be fearful and trust him at the same time, right? I want, it was funny. I was at one point trying to hire somebody, and, me and Jeremy had prayed about stuff, and this is a while ago, but we were praying about stuff, and I said to one of my friends, I sat here and prayed for somebody. He sent me somebody, and now I'm questioning it. Oh, is this the right person? Is this the right person? It's like, who am I to question it when he clearly sent this person, right? So you can't be fearful.
No. Just sitting here going through some of the things that I know I'd taken notes on. I probably didn't take as many notes on this one as I did the first 2 episodes, just because I knew there would be so much back and forth conversation. The thing is that I probably want people to take from this episode is I want people to understand the humility that the two of you have. It's unique. And so I hope that this podcast reaches people with that message. I talked about this a lot in the first 2 episodes of what I wanted this podcast to be. Obviously, I want it to be a local thing. Mm-hmm. I want it to be local people learning about local people. That's what I want. Yeah. And I want people to walk away listening to this and saying, I feel like I know Jeremy and Shanty Morrow now. I've seen the S&J trucks run up and down the road. Mm-hmm. I see that big bearded crazy guy. But now I think I know him, almost to the point where they feel like they can just approach you.
I mean, you can.
I know you can, but almost to say, hey, I feel like I know you guys now. But not just you, not just the two of you, anybody that I have on this podcast. Yeah. And I've got several people coming up on the show that I have the exact same goals for. We've got a lot of great people in this town. And
Absolutely.
We talk about that a lot, and we're going to talk about it even more. But
like anybody, I feel like in this town would just give you the shirt right off your back, just ask for it, because...
Well, and we've seen that. We've watched this town come together time and time again.
For benefit auctions, school auctions, somebody gets in an accident and they're out of work, like... in 2 days, people have like 10 grand to help them. Like some people, give their last $5. That's just how this town is. And
we love this little town. When we started, like we talked, with pretty humble beginnings, and Dan, you talked about that. We'd jump in the truck and run just wherever to get whatever. And that was some of me and Shanty's early days. We loved getting in the truck.
Those were our road trips. We loved them.
We've always loved those road trips, and we'd bring stuff home. We'd bring junk home and we'd fix it, and we just... some of our humble beginnings like that. And now
we bought a semi in Florida that was just a single cab and drove it all the way home from Florida. Had the best time going back. I mean, like,
so those early days, those humble beginnings, that's what kind of ground us in there. And this town always supported us. There was always something good from this town that, people rallied behind us. I broke my leg there one time working, and just the phone calls and the text, hey man, if you need something,
and the meals that were brought to our house,
the people that donated and helped us, and
they didn't even have to do that, because I was perfectly fine, but they loved us enough that was the point of it, and like you just accept those gifts because
so from those humble beginnings, you saw our house at one point, like there was equipment sitting everywhere, semis in the driveway, and so we come to a point where we had the opportunity to buy some ground in the city limits of Brownstown, and we've always agreed that we wanted to stay in Brownstown because that was our home. because we love Brownstown. It would have made more business sense to move to Seymour, where you're closer to the interstate and just all of the draw that the metropolis of Seymour has.
Well, then that's
for a
closer
business.
to more employees. That would attract more employees.
Right, but we didn't want to leave Brownstown. And we didn't want to leave Brownstown with our business because we love Brownstown.
Yeah, you guys have always given back to Brownstown. I mean, I think that's obvious of anybody in this town. You know, they see your success, but they've also seen you giving back. And you've kind of gone down the path of where I always want this podcast to lead to. Mm-hmm. And the question that is going to kind of be the staple of this, and you've said a lot to kind of answer this question, but I'm going to ask it and let you guys give your answer as to what you think makes Brownstown so special. What makes Jackson County so special? Why is it, again, that you've hung your hat here, your business here? Why is Brownstown such a special place?
Brownstown is such a special place. You're absolutely right. We alluded to it. The people in Brownstown and Jackson County are what make this space, this little bitty speck, so special. But in that, it's the core values of those folks.
I mean, we have more churches available to people to go to.
Per capita.
And it's like, we just have so many good Christian people that just genuinely understand that it's not about religion, it's about loving people. And I think that makes a huge difference in a community when you have that many people with the same values.
And we have never had so many people in our life, and I don't think that you would anywhere else, that have been genuinely happy to see us take a win.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about this town.
Like we get phone calls when people, hear of us, winning a job and like patting us on the back and, just cheering us on, like when you have that, like it helps keep you going because like.
And we've had that from the beginning, and I've always said S&J would not be a successful business if it wasn't for the folks that we had in our corner. Because in our early days, we would beg, borrow, and just short of steal. We had a lot of folks that helped us, and I can still remember one of the first times that you offered advice to us. We sent you an invoice for the job that we did out at your house, and it was for services. Well, so young in business, we had no clue that you don't charge tax on service. Hey,
that's what QuickBooks had set up.
And what I've always loved, and I think that's why you and I were fast friends, because you called me, you offered advice, and you didn't judge me. And that was what I loved about Dan, was you have always kind of been one of those mentors to us from the early days. And like you said, we call each other and we bounce stuff off each other. We call each other and we say, hey, listen to what happened today, and we have those moments. And that's, Jackson County is full of those folks that a friend that I would call up and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or a different friend that I would call up and say, hey, I've got this job that came up. Can you loan me your bulldozer, and we'll trade it out later down the road, and I'll come work for you. And they never questioned us.
Yeah, that's something that of all of what makes Brownstown special, or what makes Jackson County special, things that I haven't thought about is what you just kind of alluded to, is there's more people rooting for you to succeed than there are people rooting for you to fail.
Yeah.
And I know that seems so simple, but I'm telling you, not every community is like that. Mm-hmm. There are some communities that I think, they just soon root for somebody to fail as they would to see them win, and it's just not like that here.
I think early on we had to learn really quick, because there are, naysayers and whatnot, but we had to learn really quick that we couldn't rely on the one bad thing when 10 people said something good.
And that was always, I think, a lesson that Dan taught us really well from the beginning is you've got to rely on the folks that are going to be in your corner.
Right, and not be jealous of you and not, have judgment. Like his wife, is my best friend, and, I can go to their house in my PJs if I wanted, and my hair thrown up in a knot with no makeup on, and Not that I would get judged anywhere else, but I know I won't get judged there. So I can just be myself around, them early on. And it just kind of just like, I just am who I am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, I don't know where we're at on time. Man, I feel like we could do probably 2 or 3 episodes, but probably better not. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the two of you being on. Jeremy, it seems like you and I have been talking about this whole podcast thing forever. At least a couple of years. It seems like, I don't know. And from time to time, I'd say, when I start this podcast, I'm going to. And you were one of the people that said, are you going to do this?
Yeah. You would talk about it. And I feel like that's kind of how our relationship works. Dan would say, I'm going to do this. And he was looking for somebody to talk him out of it. But I'm always that guy that's like, yeah, do it.
Yeah.
And maybe not always the most, like, I'm not sure what I'm not the most positive influence all the time. Like, I'd be the guy that said, hey, we're going to go jump off of a bridge, and because we're friends, you're going to go do it with me.
Yeah. Well, because it's always fun.
Yeah. And Shanty's seen that. You and I go back and forth like a couple old men off of grumpy old men. And the story I love to tell about you is the shoes that I made you throw out a window of a moving vehicle because you were so tired of me writing you about how they were an old man pair of shoes. And that's what I want.
But they really weren't that bad, but he just liked riling him up.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have a tendency to we know how to get right there at that level underneath under each other's skin to have a good time. But for the listeners out there, I got tired of being told about my old man shoes. So I just threw them out the damn window.
And the podcast is kind of the same. Like he'd bring it up and I'm going to do it, and I'd kick him in the butt. Yeah, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just super happy that you're doing it, and I'm happy to get to see how it evolves and what it evolves into. My dad is pretty hard on you at times, but he called you the Joe Rogan of Jackson County. I don't know if there's going to be any copyright issues with that. Or
I know. I'll have to get him on sometime and razz him about. He is my all-time favorite Democrat, and I like to tell him that from time to time.
Yeah.
No, I don't know where the podcast is going to go. I don't know how many we'll put out, but I'm having fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, and honestly, that's what I'm looking to do. Is just I don't sit still. You guys know this. I can't sit still at all. I got to be doing something. I got to be challenged constantly. Yeah. I got to be figuring out what next is all the time. And this podcast was just something I talked about forever and ever, and I finally did it. And I got a lot of good, I got some good push in the shoulders from a lot of good people here in town. Greg Deck was a huge influence. I don't know if he knows just how big of an influence he was on me. He's, just so people know, he's allowed us to use space for this podcast. But every time I talked to Greg, he was so positive, and Greg is the type of person that when he believes you and he's positive about it, then it just makes you believe in yourself.
Yeah, so, he was a big supporter of us too. Like, he was an encourager and offer advice when we needed it, and he's just always been behind us as well. Yeah.
So when you get people like that, and like I said, you guys and other people in town pushing you, it made it so much easier to do. So, well, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to finish it out like we always do, or what we have in the last two. We're going to finish it out with some good original music by our good buddy, Justin Underwood. He'll take us home at the end of the podcast, but man, we finally did it after 2 or 3 years of talking about this. We did it. We sat down and did it. So podcast number 3 is in the books. Yeah. Thank you both. And let's find a good story or a reason to do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I wonder if anybody listening to this will realize that our batteries went dead in the recorder about halfway through. We had to start over. I'll try to edit that out.
I guess it depends on how good your editing gets on the 3rd episode, right?
Yeah, I'm no pro at it.
It takes a man with some patience and a famous reputation for running long and hard both